On today's show, the Caps are building real momentum through defense, depth scoring, and at just the right time, the Thanksgiving milepost.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI. I've covered the Capitals for the past 4 seasons for Locked On and various other outlets before that. I'm also the host of the weekly show called The Capitals Minute Cast, available wherever you find your podcasts. And as always, I want to thank you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. In this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about players on the rise. More specifically in this episode, I'm talking about Ethen, Frank, and Ilya Protas. Where do they fit into the Capitals master plan? A bit later, we'll talk about the Black Friday game and where the Capitals are at this Thanksgiving milepost. But just to get it going here, talking about Chychrun-Roy, and wow, what a pairing and the production that we have seen from that pairing. And it's all a part of the big picture that, of course, 2 great defenders. But what does it mean having Roy and Chychrun work so well together? And why has it led to Chychrun scoring so many goals? So let's dive into that in the first segment of today's show. And the one thing that is apparent to me is that Jakob Chychrun and Matt Roy are playing like one of the most, I'm going to say, reliable second pairings in the league, you know, as I take a look around the league. And right now it's giving the Capitals a whole new backbone and at the right time. And it's not something that I had really circled as well. Like, that is what is going to fix this team. And, you know, to be clear, I don't think that'll fix the team, but the production that we have seen offensively by Chychrun is quite stunning. And let's get into the pairing because it has quietly become one of the biggest stories of this season, or I'm going to say here, at least as of late. Because when Chychrun and Roy are on the ice together at 5-on-5, the thing that's noticeable is the Caps have been outscoring teams by a wide margin. And to drill down on that, more of a granular level, we're talking 18 goals for and only 4 against. And if you're asking me, that's not a sample fluke. That's domination with a purpose. And, you know, again, it's one of the things that Spencer Carberry said that they had been really going over the film and even talking about the game against the Jets, that they did a lot of pre-scouting and a lot of pre-video and all that kind of stuff, that I don't think he wants to give away the ingredients to the secret sauce per se, but it does appear as though the Capitals have kicked it up a notch. And, you know, keeping it with Chychrun and Roy here, you watch these guys and you can see how their styles complement each other very well. And what do I mean when I say that? Is that Chychrun wants to jump into the rush, wants to pinch, and wants to activate below the dots. And how is he able to do that? He's able to do that because Matt Roy takes care of the house. He holds the structure, wins board battles, and, you know, shields the middle of the ice. And I think makes it clean, simple breakout plays rather easy. And that is at least part of the success of that pairing together. And, you know, it would be one thing if it was a game or 2, but you take a look at the point streak that Chychrun is on in his goal streak right now. Well, I think that really kind of tells the story. It's the balance, and you can tell there was a lot of work put in this in camp. Spencer Carberry talking about getting the reads down between them, getting the support patterns drilled in, and you can see it paying off now big time. And it speaks, you know, if you want to take a look at the numbers, their possession numbers are way up from last year. Their expected goals numbers are strong, and their scoring chances tilt heavily in their favor. And the pair is giving the Caps, I think, that stability that they didn't have last season. And it's not exclusively Chychrun and Roy. You've also seen great production from John Carlson as well. And what I really like here is that it's freeing up the rest of the blue line. And it's kind of funny that the blue line is the one that's, providing a lot of the offense. And it's not something that you see around the league too often, but I like it. And when this team has struggled to score 5-on-5, it's good that you can get goals from multiple sources. And the thing of it is that, when you take a look at your pairings, if your second pair, is winning shifts and driving play forward, it means several things. It means, less pressure on the top pair, less defensive zone time overall, and better matchups for everybody in that mix, as well as you have cleaner exits and, big picture, more opportunity to push the tempo of the game. So that's my big takeaway here, is that Chychrun and Roy have turned into a real strength, and that's a good thing to have that. And like I said, at points and good swaths of the season that the Capitals have struggled to score, period, that they have a strength on the blue line is a good thing, and you take a look at the forwards kicking it up here in the last game against Winnipeg as well, is that, it is encouraging, like I said, at this Thanksgiving milepost that many people talk about. Where is your team at Thanksgiving? It appears a really early take here is that the Capitals are finding their way. To be clear here, a lot to take care of, but when we're talking the little things that are really the big things, I'm talking Chychrun and Roy pairing, is you trust them in those tough minutes. You trust them against speed, and you trust them late in periods. And, for a team that's trying to build a balanced identity, I think that pair, the Chychrun-Roy pairing, has been absolutely huge for the Capitals as of late. And, to circle back to what I've talked about on the show before is, Chychrun and how great that has worked out. That there was some reluctance among some Capitals fans if that was going to work. This guy's a bit of a prima donna, I heard, when he first came here, and, he didn't fit in on various other teams that he played for. And there was the reluctance of former GM Brian McClellan to sign him to a longer term deal. And also for Chychrun himself to see, how well am I going to fit into Washington? I think it's very apparent, him getting that extension and him being a part of the Capitals blue line for years to come, that this is just the beginning of something great. And you combine that with the fact that Matt Roy signed a lengthy contract, or is going to be here, shall I say, for the next several years, that pairing very well could be, the backbone of the Capitals blue line for years to come, because there is some questions, right, that John Carlson is in a contract year. Trevor Van Riemsdyk is in a contract year. And, you take a look at TVR, for example, that you've seen different players in favor of him. I'm talking Chisholm and McElrath here. But, the blue line in general has been playing well and has been that key offensive contributor. And you definitely could circle Chychrun and Roy as a part of the Capitals' winning success, at least as of late. All right, so coming up here after the break, we'll talk about players on the rise. I'm talking about Ethen, Frank, and Little Pro, Ilya Protas. Could he get a shot on the big team? I'll discuss next. Let's be honest, most of us can't name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401k, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. It helped me organize my accounts, track my spending, and get a better handle on my investments without ever having to touch a dreaded spreadsheet. And the thing I love about it is it shows me where I'm spending my money wisely on retirement, maybe not so wisely on going out to eat and sports memorabilia. It's worked well for me, and I know it will work well for you as well. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I want to thank all of you for making this your first listen of the day and for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. All right, let's next go into segment 2 and talking about players on the rise. And when we talk about this team, and I spoke about it in yesterday's show, is that a true team that does things well, a true litmus test of the sustainability of your team is the development. And in this segment, I'm going to talk about Ethen Frank, a guy that put his time in Hershey and is now getting an opportunity, I'm going to say based on injury, playing on that fourth line. And all things considered, has done a good job, and this guy, it should be as no real surprise, was an all-star in the AHL, the fastest skater, all those kind of things, and how he has been, just a really big contributor and definitely a guy that has taken the long way home as far as that is concerned. And as far as Ilya Protas is concerned, I think making a case that if what we're seeing as of right now, I'm talking sort of up the middle, and, I'm talking about Connor McMichael and Hendrik Slop here. If for some reason up the middle there, that doesn't work, Ilya Protas is making a case of, hey guys, I'm down in Hershey here looking for my opportunity. So let's dive into that in segment number 2 here, talking about the players on the rise. And the big take here is Ethen Frank and Ilya Protas are two Caps forwards trending sharply upward. And they are reshaping the depth picture right in front of our eyes. So let's talk about these two because they're giving the organization something it didn't always have. And what is that? Internal answers. And I think that to a certain extent, us as Capitals fans, we take it for granted that we have such a great farm club, to use a baseball term, the AHL team. For the Capitals, still pro hockey, still knocking it out of the park, still doing great things in Hershey, and has developed some of the greatest Capitals players into the well-rounded NHL players that you see in front of you right now. That goes for Ethen Frank and also Ilya Protas. So let's start with Ethen here. This guy came in, looked hungry, he looked fast, he looked confident. And I would say, above all, you can tell he believes he belongs here on a nightly basis. And it was tough for Ethen Frank because when there were the cuts made at the end of camp, there was the real feeling like that might be the last of Ethen Frank that we ever see. He didn't really seem like he figured into the master plans. And was he even going to make it to Hershey? But as it turns out, just based on injuries and those kind of things presented an opportunity for him. And he has done what I'm going to say a really good job. In the games he's played, he puts up points. He's carrying the puck with authority. He's using his speed to push defenders back and, producing at a rate that's making the staff rethink his whole role. So, you've seen Sonny Milano in there, but it's going to be interesting to see how the deck is shuffled at some point. Some of it's closer than others. I'm talking about Nick Dowd. What is that going to mean for the roster? What does that mean for Connor McMichael? And, down the road a ways is when Pierre-Luc Dubois returns. I think, that this, the team is playing better right now in this small stretch than they did throughout the season. So it's interesting that you take out two big pieces in Pierre-Luc Dubois and Nick Dowd, something that would have made you thought that it's doom and gloom has actually showed quite a bit of promise. And Ethen Frank is one of those guys that, like I say, is hungry and he is doing his darndest to get a sweater on a night in and night out basis, and he knows that the competition is stiff. He knows that there is other players in Hershey that are just chomping at the bit, to make this big club. So I think that is ultimately, why you have seen some of the best out of Ethen Frank. That 2-goal assist night he had earlier, that wasn't luck. That was Frank, I say, playing with pace and straight line intensity. And for a team that has for a long time been dubbed as old and slow, Ethen Frank definitely flies in the face of that because, well, he's not old for one, and the guy's got wheels galore. And, I think that at least in part, that is why you're seeing him in there right now. And I think that he's making a compelling case that, lean into my strengths. And one of his biggest strengths and his skill set is the speed. But what we saw in the other game, having Ethen Frank put up 2 goals, having Sonny Milano put up 2 goals, kind of defies, our expectations and just the young players on this team that are really, pushing for an everyday job. Because Carber even talked about it, about how Frank is trusting his game, not overthinking, just using that skating ability to tilt the ice. And putting him in there when the matchup calls for it. That if you need a guy that can just scoot down the ice, then he presents a really great option. And what I've seen so far, I've liked from Ethen Frank. And it was kind of a tough thing for him last year because he had a spot. And then all of a sudden you saw Ryan Leonard come to this team. And all of a sudden it's just like, hey guys, what about me? But he's doing what he can do right now. And that's all you can do is play your best every game and hope that the coaching staff notices. And I definitely think that Spencer Carberry and bigger picture Chris Patrick have noticed how well he has played. Next, a player that has been absolutely torching it for Hershey is Ilya Protas. Yes, the younger brother to Alexei Protas is definitely making a case, and I really believe that at some point this season, we will see Ilya Protas on the big team, whether it's due to injury or something's just not working up the middle. I definitely think that's the case. So Ilya Protas, like I say, torching it in Hershey, is on a heater right now. 6 straight games with a goal. And he topped it off with a shorthanded marker where he had read the play beautifully, picked up a pass, walked in, and absolutely buried it. And that's that hockey IQ that I think that he has. And it's interesting that when I heard that there was going to be 2 Protases in the same organization, I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, did we just bring him in here because Alexei's his brother? What are the odds that both of these players are really good? Well, the odds are pretty good. Alexei Protas hasn't had quite the season that he had hoped for, at least as of yet, in comparison to last year. But Ilya Protas, his first foray into pro hockey has been really great. And but when you talk about what he did, bearing that goal there, that's not just scoring, that's scoring with confidence and awareness. And part of his skill set is somewhat similar to his brother. Protas is big. He's smart, like I said, his hockey IQ. He shields the puck well. And when he gets rolling, he can dominate shifts below the dots. And, the thing of it is there's a lot of comparisons, a lot of lines that you can draw to Alexei. Alexei has some history playing at center as well, but Spencer Carberry has said that, he's not in love with the idea of playing at center. So that's why he's there. But, the center position for the Capitals has been, well, a bit of a question mark. For him doing what he has done in Hershey, and if he continues, he's making a case that, hey guys, if there's a struggle, if there's an injury, that you don't need to go outside of the organization. I'm your guy. And I really believe that he is. And sometimes it doesn't always translate from the AHL to the NHL, but I have a hunch, I have a premonition that it will. But he's exactly the kind of player who can come up and help you when you need a spark, or when you need someone who can cycle and extend offensive zone time, especially with injuries always lurking through an entire NHL season. That, being a development league, that it is definitely making a case for the Capitals, and he's making a case for himself to say, hey, I'm your guy. And as of right now, as I record this at the Thanksgiving break here, I believe he is the guy. All right, so coming up here after the break, it is sort of a state of the Capitals at one of the NHL mileposts, the Thanksgiving break. Where are the Capitals at? And what about the game on Black Friday against the Leafs? I'll discuss straight ahead. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game more exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. So whether you're a fan of the local team, the Wizards, or any other team in the NBA, open up the FanDuel app, put a little bit of money on the game. All of a sudden, it got that much more exciting. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The best way that you can help grow the show is to subscribe to Locked On Capitals on YouTube, like the videos, and comment anything down below. All right, in the final segment of today's show, we're talking about the mile marker that is the Thanksgiving break in the NHL. And where is a team sitting at said break? And I'm going to be honest, a good news, candid with you. Normally it's like I got good news and bad news. It's good news as well that the Capitals are playing better. And as I take a peek at the standings in the Metro right now, Devils in first, 31, Hurricanes in second place, 30, and the Capitals and Islanders both with 28 points, identical records, 24, 13, and 9. So you could say tied for third place. But it's tight. The Capitals have been playing well, but there is no time for complacency. As you take a look down, the Penguins 27 points, Flyers 27 points, Blue Jackets 26, and Rangers 26. So with 2 points separating the Capitals with the worst place, Jackets and Rangers, that it can flip in a hurry, which is, well, rather apparent, as it was a week or so ago that I was talking to you guys about how it seemed doom and gloom as the Capitals at that time were all the way down at the bottom of the Metro. So at the Thanksgiving mile marker here, I think the Capitals are in a good position, and on deck is the Maple Leafs on Friday. And, that's going to be another good match against Toronto. A team that, has had its issues as well as the Capitals this year, but has a lot of firepower. And Toronto showed that the Caps can hang with elite speed and firepower when they execute their structure and trust depth. When you take a look at it. So it's going to be a good match. There is skilled players on each team. This is not going to be a walk in the park. So let's get into that Black Friday game and what is on deck here. So what the Capitals want to do is they want to manage puck management with a priority, winning battles on the half wall, getting pucks deep behind Toronto's defense, and forcing their top players to go a long way. And I think that what the Capitals have to do is they have to do what has worked well for them so far, is continue to lean on the defense, right? That, if the forwards aren't chipping in, that you have the luxury of having a really good defense in the form of Carlson and Chychrun that can pick up the slack. Because like I said, as far as Toronto is concerned, if we take a look at the standings on them as well, is that I don't think that they're necessarily, having the season that they had hoped for. So I think that this is an opportunity for us to make the most and, just really rack up some points. Because like I talked about earlier there, the Maple Leafs here are in second to last place in the Atlantic right now with 23 points. The only team worse than them right now is the Sabres with 22 points, but still a tight race there. The Lightning with 30 points. So not a great point spread between them. And if you falter, if you fail, if you go on a losing streak, it can mean curtains for your season. And for the Maple Leafs, the one thing I know about that team is that despite, what we see in the standings right now, their record of 10-10-3, that I don't know if it tells the full story, right? That there was some subtractions to the team this last season. And also some of the star players not performing, also injuries and net minding have sometimes been the issues that have plagued that team for years. One thing I'll say about Toronto is that fan base loves that team come hell or high water. That if you watch any of the games and on an off night, if I see the Maple Leafs are on, sometimes I'll check it out. And outside the arena, even just fans everywhere. And that's with a really, I'm going to go ahead and say a pretty poor record now. A 10-10-3 record, second to last place, but they still have faith in that team. But the one thing that's a cautionary tale for the Capitals is I don't want them to, fall into a trap game, right? That, this is going to be an easy out, that we're rolling, that take a look at where we are and take a look at where they're at, that it's not going, it's going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be the case. And, you take a look at Toronto, they have presented problems for the Capitals in the past. This is the opportunity to really put the pedal to the metal and rack up as many points as possible, because we are at that mile marker right now. And after now, it's all about just really, we found what works. The blue line's chipping in. I think that we have seen some success with the line combos, with Sordoff on the second line center and, players that are really taking it to the next level. We need to use that as the blueprint for the rest of the season and hope that that's the blueprint that is going to breed success. Now, the thing I will say is that the Capitals cannot lean exclusively on the blue line for their offensive production. And, we saw in the last game, Connor McMichael putting up a goal and Ovechkin scoring in the game as well, that they can do it. But there's a lot of firepower that we need to see more of. We need to see more from Wilson. We need to see more from Protas and the different players that were, the big contributors last season. We need to see a whole lot more from them. It's a good thing, that they were able to get that scoring from, an unsuspected source in the blue line. But that's not sustainable. That's going to win you a handful of games, right? Or more, but I think that for this team to be truly, ready for warfare, and that's, the remainder of the season, is that this team is going to have scoring, lines 1 through 4. And, it's just a cherry on top if the blue line kicks in. And just leaning into your net-minding tandem that has put you in the position that you're in. Make no mistake about it. The Capitals are in this position because Logan Thompson has been lights out. What we saw from Charlie Lindgren against the Jets, that is the tandem that is going to serve you well, down the stretch here, all the way into the spring. That, all things considered, at this mile marker, I'm feeling positive about this team. This team is also preparing to head out west, the dreaded West Coast trip. The games that start usually at 10 p.m. Eastern is not ideal for a Capitals fan. So some of those shows might be a little bit later in the day because, well, I'm a guy like a lot of you out there that has to go to a job first thing in the morning. So a tough stretch here. And we know that historically, those trips out west have sometimes given the Capitals fits, sometimes successful, but there's some good teams out west that the Capitals will be taking on that they need to, just to borrow a thing again from Davey Martinez, go 1-0 every single game, not concentrate too much on what's going on around you, just concentrate on winning that game. And then I think a lot of the other things will take care of themselves. You'll see the power play, hopefully, right? That still isn't fixed. That's still one thing that's circled that needs to get fixed. The PK, another thing circled, that this team is in a good position. They're not out of the woods. There are still plenty of things that they need to take care of. But this team is in a much, much better spot right now than they were a week, 2-3 weeks ago. So Capitals fans, you should be feeling confident about where your team is at. And I look for greater things after this Thanksgiving break. All right. Once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, your only daily year-round podcast covering the Capitals. And I want to thank all of you that listen on the audio side and watch this on YouTube. You, as a matter of fact, are what makes this show successful. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Nights. Every game, every night, until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, once again, I want to thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. My name is Dan HOLMI, and I'll talk to you again next time.